So we shall start with breathing. Many years ago, when Rabbi Wein died, during the memorial service, I was trying to think about how can we all feel something together. And I thought about the word and the emotion that he used to use so candidly, and that was love. But for me, love breathes in Hebrew. And I want to share with you this breath, and it goes like this. The word in Hebrew, as you know, is ahava. In order to have a relationship of love, you need to be able also to empty yourself so that you can receive love. And that is the way the word is constructed in Hebrew. So we're going to all try it together now. Let's try and say ahava. Let's do it again. Ahava. Now we're ready. So the first word was ahava. And the second word, believe it or not, is kedusha, which is exalting, which is cherishing, which is holiness, has many, many, many words. But because Hebrew is a viable language, by the way, it was never a dead language, and it was never only a religious language. You had Jewish people all over the world using it as a network for commerce all through the ages. It was not only a religious language. Being a viable language, it changes. You've read Wittgenstein and you've read his ideas, and his ideas talk about the meanings of change when we use the word. The word changes along with its meaning. So in Hebrew, when you want to dedicate a book for someone, so you dedicate it for one person from all the rest of the world or to a group of people, but they are the unique, they are the exalted. So in Hebrew you say lehakdish, from the same root. If you want to dedicate yourself to a person, in a marriage, for example, you do kiddushim. You choose the one person from all the people in the world to share your present and future with. Lehakdish is to remember, is to exalt this uniqueness. It is also connected to Havdalah. What do we do in this ceremony of Havdalah, in this ceremony of separation? What we do is we take this cherished time of Shabbat and we remember how unique it is, and we exalt it, and we breathe in and we breathe out with our love to accept, to get ready for the rest of the week. So we started with love, and we added Kedusha, and now we will continue to the pursuit of happiness. Sounds good, right? But I left it there, so hold on. So in this little booklet that I gave you yesterday, there is a beautiful, beautiful song written many, many years ago. Hundreds of years ago, maybe even over 1,000 years ago, because the songs that were written in the Bible were probably the ones most memorable, and therefore the songs are probably the most ancient pieces of literature in the Bible. And in it, there is a song about a man who is eager for life, and is eager for a good life. And it is said, "Who is the man that desires life and loves the days, that he may see good within them? Keep thy tongue from evil and thy lips from speaking guile. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. So now that you know how to do it, we're basically ready for the future. We're ready to know how to step forward. We're ready to take our cherished treasures and to walk together towards the future. But in order to do that well, we need to educate, and we need to keep getting educated. All of us rabbis never stop studying. Probably because, once you have that bug, you never want to stop studying. And that can be done only with an organization. Having people dedicate time, and back to Kedusha, lehakdish zman, to dedicate time. Having people dedicating resources, none of this is superficial. None of this is, how do you say muvan me'elav in English?
Taken for granted.
Taken for granted. None of it. So I wanted to go back to the blessing of the wine and to say a blessing to not taking things for granted. And for that, I need a glass of water. We seem to celebrate with wine, with something which is very unique and people-made. But I think it's important to remember what we take for granted, what we think is obvious. So, Baruch haor ba'olam, Baruch haor ba'adam, Baruch hamakor ve'hateva, ve'pri ha'adama. Acknowledging the source of nature and water. L'chaim. So this is a time for thanks. This is a time for Toda Rabba. And I want to thank each and every one of you sitting in this room. It is so not obvious that we are meeting here today after 10 years. I remember 10 years ago standing on the stage, finishing my speech and saying, I am a secular rabbi. I was very excited to say that, and I still am. I got back home. It was during one of the GAs, the General Assembly of the Federations of America. And I was interviewed by the Haaretz newspaper. 3 days later, the headline, absolutely the headline of Haaretz, had the first secular rabbi in Israel. And since then, we were fortunate to be able to express ourselves over the media. But what we don't do is that we don't use the media to negate different things that are going on in Israel. Because when secular people get organized in Israel, it is immediately a feeling that they are anti-religious, anti-establishment, anti. And nobody listens to the message, to the positive message, to the positive Judaism we all share. So even though we are almost every other month in some newspaper, television show, radio, we make sure we are not on any radio, television, media, negating or going against anything in Israel. Only fighting for the positive. Now, what can fighting for the positive do? So let me tell you a little bit about what our rabbis do. We have, as we said, ordained 27 rabbis. Studying with us, we have no less than 23 more people that will graduate over the next 4 years. They come to study with us with a master's degree. And what do they do? For example, one of our rabbis who was working in the Community Center Association is now responsible for community work in the area of Haifa and the north of Israel. She has implemented much of the philosophy and many of the functions within, I would say, Israeli life, and made it positively, Jewishly humanistic. Another person, her name is Rabbi Reut Hamer. Another person by the name of Rabbi Oren Yehi Shalom is a director of an NGO for the bettering of education in Israel, which is a big slate. But he also advances humanistic Jewish education. He, together with another person by the name of Orit, who is also studying with us and will be graduating soon, wrote a curricula, Jewish humanistic curricula, about Jewish culture in Israel. They have been able to sell this curricula to over 100 schools in Israel, which is an enormous number, because when a school like that buys this curricula, they have to teach that curricula for the next 5 years. And this curricula is a curricula which was accepted by the Ministry of Education. Another rabbi by the name of Nardi Green started an internet site which is called Ceremonies. And through that internet site, we do hundreds of weddings a year. Hundreds of weddings a year. Now think about it. 10 years ago, when we started to think to do secular weddings in Israel, we thought, who would use it? Who would come? As you know, it doesn't mean anything legally. There is no change in your legal status. You live in a partnership like a common law marriage, but the ceremony doesn't mean anything legally like it does here. So we thought that nobody would come. And we are so surprised. Hundreds, I'm telling you, hundreds of ceremonies a year. Some of our rabbis have good income coming in from those ceremonies. And that's very important, because most of our rabbis do not have congregations. But the news is that more and more congregations are being built by our rabbis. Over 7 new congregations have started in the past few years, some in kibbutzim, some in small villages, and some in the cities. And this is very exciting. And why is it so important? Because last year, there was a new law passed in Israel for the first time. And the law is that the state of Israel will support non-Orthodox communities. Now, when the Reform and the Conservative invested over 7 years in that lawsuit, they were hoping for a decision that would say that the government would support conservative and Reform congregations, but it didn't. What the law says, that it will support non-Orthodox congregations. Well, hey, here we are. And now we just have to meet the criteria. There are a few legal obstacles, but not great. Most of the work is up to us. So the idea of Tmura, of creating change and getting benefit from this transformation, that's the meaning of the word, is actually happening. Not by fighting against, but by proving that we could do positive, that we could do positive Judaism, that we can make a change within Israeli society. And if we encounter work in schools, and we encounter work in Jewish community centers, and if we encounter the work within the ceremonies, and there will be thousands and thousands of people who are educated and celebrated this way, then we will actually make real difference in Israeli society, and eventually in Israeli law, back to Israeli society, and to continue this wonderful dialogue across the Atlantic. I want to sum up to express the challenge that we share. I don't know how many of you understand how much of a resemblance there is between the American Jewish challenge, and the Israeli Jewish challenge. Many times when I give talks for different publics, but let's say commanders in the Israeli army, after a few minutes, provoked by me, but after a few minutes, there is always someone who gets up and says, "Leave me with all this Jewish stuff. I'm an Israeli. I don't need this Jewish stuff." And I say to him, "So what are you doing here? What are you fighting for? Why are we here together?" So many of our Jewish friends, sometimes family here in America, feel that they're Jewish, but they don't have to do anything about it. They just live their life Jewishly. They don't want to belong. They don't think they have to belong. And the outcome is, as you know, that the tendency not to belong is growing. So we are facing a whole new era, a very big challenge. We're facing it on both sides of the Atlantic. We are, for the first time ever in the Jewish experience, have to make up a new model. The ancient model, and we talked about it a little bit yesterday, was belonging or not belonging to a temple, belonging or not belonging to a synagogue. And then the creation of the State of Israel created a situation where the tiny minority belonged in the beginning to congregation. The minority has grown, but it is still a minority. Belonged to congregation. Financed by the government, a new model, never existed before. But what about all the other Jewish people who don't belong to Orthodox communities or Reform or conservative communities? What about the majority? And remember, the majority are the non-belonging. So we have a new challenge. We have to invent a model of connecting, a model that will bring us towards the next decades. And we can do it because the ideology that we have, and Adam spoke about it yesterday, with the powerful shlichei tzibur that Rabbi Jeff spoke about yesterday, is where we can go forward, creating congregations, sustaining congregations for people who want to belong. And for people who want to connect, we have to invent. And in this room, there are many people who can help us invent. So with the power of love, with the pursuit of happiness, we shall invent. Thank you.